You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back here on Friday, a little bit past noon Central. One final time for all you on-demand folks out there, all you pro folks, stay tuned. We'll be back a little bit after this. For Options Oddity, should be an interesting one. It was an interesting one last week. Some of those trades have already paid off pretty handsomely, so stay tuned for all that goodness. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so, Options Insider Radio Network. Remember, if you like what you hear, this show, any of the shows that we do, throw some stars or a like or a comment, whatever platform you listen on, whatever they allow you to do, it does help new folks continue to discover the content. And of course, if you want to check out more content, you want exclusive pro Q&As, we had the folks from IB tackling a bunch of your questions earlier this week. Got Options Oddities coming up a little bit later today. Of course, the second you hit that button, you're getting well north of 200 plus episodes now waiting for you at your beck and call. Of course, live access to this, everything else we do. And you get your name in the hat for the bespoke pro trading crates. So those are pretty freaking cool, if I do say so myself. If you don't believe me, just ask the Rock Lobster, who's constantly bugging me. How come I don't get a pro trading crate? So you want to get your name in the hat, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go as we go out to see who's joining us on the old Volatility Views program today. And this guy bugs me about a bunch of other stuff, but not about the pro trading crate, thankfully. He is the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. I think he's just still giddy that RMC is coming to his neck of the woods in a few months. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here, man. How are you?
I am doing well. How are things in the land of the pit?
Oh, it's definitely been an interesting few days. Markets are a little all over the place right now. The big rebalance today is all the buzz. People want to know what kind of net effect that's going to end up being and what the close is going to look like today.
Rebalance? I don't even know what you're talking about. What rebalance are you talking? Hey, a little birdie told me you guys scooped some of those Keurig Dr. Pepper calls that we talked about in Options Oddities last week. Sounds like they worked out pretty well for you, sir. Which ones did you guys end up getting?
They have so far. We bought them for 65, sold some at 105. I'm still long a few.
What, was it the same Octobers, the exact same ones?
No, I bought some August.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Octobers worked out. They all worked out well. Keurig, who knew? Keurig Dr. Pepper poised to move. Well, apparently that person that we profiled on Options Oddities did. They bought a bunch of them, but intriguing stuff.
Yeah, they're happy.
Yeah, so little KDP love, and of course AT&T. A lot of the upside calls we were just talking about over the past week working out pretty well. Of course, check them out over there on Options Oddities if you want to learn more, listeners. As we keep on rolling, it's that time, listeners. It is time to commence the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we attempt to tackle the week that was, and indeed still is, from a vol trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity and just general head-scratching weirdness perspective. And coming into the start of the show, you knew they couldn't keep the bull down, listeners. They tried again today. They succeeded yesterday. They tried again today to keep the bull in its pen. They drove the S&P down. Looks like it got to about 45.37 or so, and then they said, nay, the bull will have its way, and it rallied it back up. And now, as we're kicking off the show, pretty much all the major indices are back in the green, if ever so slightly. S&P up about 1/3% right now, Dow up about 1/4%, and NASDAQ up about a little over 1/10%. That's after it took a drubbing yesterday, off about 1.5%. So interesting day out there. Of course, as the meatball alluded to, we are all kind of waiting for this big rebalance to see what impact this is going to have on the markets. You know, second this was announced, everybody started fading a lot of these NASDAQ names. You saw them took a big hit. Then as the week unfolded, people started to undo that. It was very fascinating to watch. I said, wait a minute, no, we kind of overcorrected. Let's dial that back. Then we saw a little more of it going on over the last couple of sessions. So it does seem like the market's having a bit of a hard time dialing this thing in, which is maybe partly to blame for why we're not doing a heck of a lot today, and also why VIX cash, when we kicked off the show, was literally unched from where it was this time a week ago. 13.5 on the show last week. 13.5 again when we kicked off the show this week. You don't see that too often, listeners. So that is intriguing. It also gets back to what we were saying on the show last week. We were thinking, maybe with all the uncertainty around this rebalance, maybe not going to be a ton of vol, at least downside in the offing for the coming week. And that so far has played out pretty much exactly. VVIX, though, giving up some of the ghost, or continuing to do so, really, down to about a 92. That puts it down another 5 points from where it was this time last week. So it got frothy. It was threatening that triple-digit level for a while. Starting to come in a little bit. Obviously, that VVIX number, take it with a bit of a grain of salt because there are multiple moving parts to that. There's the puts and then the calls, of course. It's kind of like the skew index. You never really know what's contributing the lion's share. You could probably reasonably intuit it, but still, it's always an interesting number to keep an eye on and maybe have a little bit of grain of salt with. VOLQ, when we kicked off the show, of course, the at-the-money vol of the NASDAQ, below an 18 handle, 1765, down about 1/3 of a point from where it was this time last week. So a bit of a weird week. Started off, as you would expect, mostly bulls in charge. Then yesterday, a bit of a backpedal from that. And then now today, as we're all awaiting the big rebalance coming up, kind of a keeping your powder dry kind of day. Mr. Meatball, what were your thoughts on vol this week? Mostly playing out the way we discussed on the show last week. Not a heck of a lot of evolution. And then what are your thoughts on what is in store for us with the coming rebalancer?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Q selling yesterday was likely active funds getting out front of it. I'm very interested to see how things are going to move at 3:00 Central when the rebalance starts to happen. There are a lot, some of these names are already down pretty decently after having a really crazy run, right? You're looking at NVIDIA down $7, and then you look and realize, oh wait, it's still above where it was, just a week ago, and that kind of maybe puts some reference to what we're looking at. This was the week of the Dow Jones. The Dow Jones really outperformed the other indexes. Really good strength in earnings from J&J, from Goldman they liked, JP Morgan, IBM they rallied on, they bought. So just a really interesting week where the Qs had a pretty out of nowhere, but also kind of predictable selling yesterday. A little buying today, and the S&P continues to kind of float around 45, 50, and doesn't seem like it wants to budge. VIX I mean, post rebalance, what do you think? Where do you think we could go? 12?
Yeah, I think it's definitely looking at some downside. The question is how much, right? And I get a little spooked around that 12 handle. What if we start kissing like an 11.5, something like that? Because part of this rebalance is to take some of the steam out of this market, right? So it'll be interesting to see what tail impact that has. I know the Rock Lobster was saying you've been doing some analysis lately about Q correlation with VIXer.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just notice on a intraday basis, the market actually likes the Qs dropping, or the VIX does. We've seen, and VIX tends to go up when these names are rallying, and it's a sign of call chasing, and call chasing can definitely make VIX perk up on rallies, and that's what we're seeing in the NASDAQ 100 relative to VIX.
Listeners, how are you folks preparing for this big rebalance? Have you liquidated anything? Have you tried to adjust? You kind of just waiting and seeing what will happen? What are your thoughts on the Qs post-rebalancing, VIX post-rebalancing? Are they less attractive to you as a result? I mean, kind of the point of this is to kind of tame some of this madness that's been going on, which has been the selling point for the Qs this year. I mean, nobody had this. Unless you're a diehard Q fanatic, nobody had this Qs rally in their cards kicking off the year this year. A lot of people had probably the opposite. A lot of people were talking about, the virtues of cash and all that stuff coming into the start of the year. So the Qs surprising a lot of people this year, but maybe some of that coming to an end now with this rebalancing, or maybe, maybe nothing can stop the bull. It's just going to take the bit in its teeth and run again, even with this rebalancing going on out there. So it is kind of interesting. A lot of questions out there. It is somewhat not quite unprecedented because we have seen on rebalancings like this before, but not kind of midstream like this and not really done so specifically to address one cause, which is everyone lamenting the concentration of liquidity in a handful of names. So that is somewhat intriguing. And again, post-pandemic, we're all living in this, again, somewhat unprecedented world where we see these crazy things happening on a week after week and month after month basis. We're kind of all jaded to it by now, but it still is. It is fascinating stuff to watch all this unfold in real time in the markets. Let's see what's unfolding out there in the land of the volatility surface. And of course, we saw our old friend July rolling off the board last week. Mr. Meatball, alas, you're much beloved. I think I had a few of them. I know a lot of our listeners had a few of them as well. Those July 13 puts, not really delivering the way the June 15s did. But then again, not many can, sir. That was kind of a once-in-a-decade kind of trade there, sir.
No, that was incredible. But I am starting to load up on the on some of the 14.5 puts for regular August. They're only about 55 cents. And I think those are relatively cheap, especially when you consider you can get about 15 cents for the 12.5s. I like that vertical for 40 cents. That's pretty cheap if we think vol is going to stay low.
I had a feeling you were looking at more downside. I have to admit, I was scouting some myself, given all this
I knew you were.
Talk. I like a little bit of a downside. You know me.
It's not overly. I'm sorry. Those were Jans. I like Jan 14.5s. I've been buying the August for about 70. I like those too. And, again, you can sell the downside if you want. But I think that you're going to see, I think that the futures curve, especially in the back months, is really, really, really still pretty darn bid. And that's something that I think will play to our favor.
Indeed. I know a lot of our listeners out there like a little bit of downside. You folks in the live chat, are you loading up on any vol downside right now? Hit us up. Let us know. I'm curious how you're going about it. There's so many ways to go about it, and we spend half of the show talking about it out there, listeners. I'm curious which way you're going. Either way, July rolling off the board this week. AUG sliding into that pole position now. Still down about half a point on the week from where it was this time last week. September taking up the number 2 slot out there, down about a third of a point. So all pretty much as expected out there. Term structure, other than that, if you go a little bit farther out, looking somewhat similar to what it was this time last week. It still tops out right around the 20 handle if you go out to the end of Q1 of next year. So longer term, you're not seeing a ton of vol baked in. Obviously more. You still got your nice contango built in there, but intriguing stuff. And again, there still is this almost exactly 2-point chasm between the cash and the August future. We've been seeing this play out month after month here in the front portion of the term structure. So it's there again, Be interesting to see how that chasm collapses, which one moves the most there to make that go away, because it has to at the end of the day. So intriguing stuff. Mr. Meatball, what's catching your eye out there in the land of the volatility surface these days?
Like I said, the curve is pretty steep. 1 second here. Let me pull up VIX. VIX is 1346. The August future is 1545. So a big 2-point spread there. And these expire on the 16th, so less than a month. SEP at 1685 seems relatively fair. You get a big jump after December. The back end of the curve looks really, really overpriced relative to the front end. Things look pretty normal from, other than kind of the width between August and December. But then you get this big jump in January, which I think is kind of curious.
Yeah, they've had that in there for a little while now. Once you get into Q1 of next year, we see a little bit of vol popping in there. It's a little over a point jump between the December future and the Jan future, about 1.1 points, listeners. So they're pricing a little bit of juice. Past his prologue, January has kind of come in like a lion the last few years, certainly post-pandemic. And so people forget even the January of 2020, before all the stuff started happening. That's when we assassinated, of course, the Iranian general on a runway there, which really started kicking vol off even before the pandemic stuff really started factoring into the market. Of course, the year after that, we had Jan 6. So January has been known to bring some thunder of late. So maybe they're pricing in a little bit of past action here. But you're right, about a little over a point jump between December and Jan. Some of that, of course, is seasonality as well. December is just usually not a rock'em sock'em month. Even still, they're pricing in nearly an 18.5 when we kicked off the show. So the slope of the contango is worth noting out there, in addition to that chasm between the cash and the front future out there. Let's see if all this term structure is delivering any paper out here in the vol market. And the answer for today is not really, but the rest of the week, it's actually a pretty banger week out there. Today, I think they're just kind of exhausted. Again, also waiting for this big rebalance. It's hard to sling a lot of paper on the Friday before this kind of unexpected rebalance. You don't really know what's going to happen, so it's intriguing to watch, and probably one of the reasons why vol is a little bit muted today. Right now, a little bit north of 250,000 contracts, about 268,000 contracts going up in the big VIX options. The ADV 731, so continuing to move in the wrong direction, even though I got a feeling if we keep up with some of the paper we saw earlier this week, we can probably turn that around. Today not helping, but the rest of the week looking pretty good. In terms of top positions, if you were waiting, listeners, to see some puts sneak into our top 10 size positions in VIX land, well then you're going to be a happy camper this week. July going off the board, wiped all those calls away. Now we got 2 puts moving into the top 10 this week. So now we are 8-2 calls over puts into the top 10. Read into that what you will, listen. But everyone's been writing in saying, what's the deal? Why are there no puts? Here you go. We just needed July to roll off the board. Get some of that vestigial paper out of the way. Get some of this new hotness here to capture our attention. A total of 11.3 million contracts. That's still a fair amount open, even with July rolling off the board recently. I think we were north of 14 going into expiration. So still north of 10 million contracts post-expiration. A lot of people slinging out there in VIX these days. To get to the number 10 spot, cost you 190,000 contracts. To take over that number 10 spot right now, that gets you to the SEP 35s. Number 9 right behind it, 196,000 of the SEP 45s. So we have seen a lot of funky ratio and vertical action out there in the SEP expiration cycle. That, of course, still represented there. Number 8, 202,000 of the AUG 21s. Number 7, the first put we've seen in the top 10 in quite some time, 226,000 of the SEP 13 puts. You like those? I'll have to go pull those up and see what they're looking at right now. SEP 13 puts. Are these on your radar? I'm looking at our chat. Our chat option queen said she's looking at the AUG 14 puts right now. And other people are saying if options queen is looking at them, then they better too. Yeah, she's eerily prescient. So if she's checking out a position, it might be worth looking at. But the SEP 13s in the top 10 this week. I'll have to go pull those up and check those out. Number 6, 249,000 of the AUG 20s. Number 5, about exactly 250,000 of the SEP 15 puts. So a little bit of SEP downside out there. Interesting. Number 4, I would have assumed Some AUG puts would have slotted in there, but again, no, SEP taking the spot this week. Interesting. Number 4, 253,000 of the AUG 25s. Number 3, 259,000 of the AUG 60s, 6Os. Number 2, 265 of the AUG 22s. And the big dog still, listeners, 293,000 of the SEP 60s. I believe they had a few more, though. I think some of those might have come off since our last show. Not coming off today, though. Like we said, not a lot of paper out there. In fact, if you take away one trade out there today, it's a really anemic day, listeners. 268,000 contracts on the tape right now for VIX. So, again, not a heck of a lot going on out there. The big dog out there today is just straight up 75,000 of the Jan 2024 47 halves. They went up straight up for 72 cents this morning. You know, it looks like might be the old 1x3 action, listeners, because the Jan 30s are number 2. They went up 25,000 times for $1.59. So you're talking about 216 versus the $1.59. If they were selling one and buying 3, clearly they're still paying a debit, but a little bit better. Mr. Meatball, did you notice this one going up today? The Jan 30 47 half 1x3, and if so, what are your thoughts on it? So you like that one?
I did notice it. Pretty size up trade. It's a hedge. They're looking for a pretty big move. Paid a little bit for the spread, which was interesting. But yeah, I mean that's likely a hedge, maybe over like a bond portfolio or something like that. But if the VIX is going to pop, that's going to pay.
Yeah, I think the only thing you take issue with is a bit of a debit for this. I mean, that a little more than you would expect for that. I don't love that. But outside of that, yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. I guess we're back in that season. We were asking that about a month and change ago, Mr. Meatball. We thought that big SEP ratio, the 1x3, that was the signal. That was the starter gun. That here we go. We're back in ratio upside season in VIX. And then not really. We haven't seen a ton of them. So fun to see some more slotted in out there today. You like that one, listeners? Jan 30, 47 half. Again, doing it for a fairly sizable debit, so not loving that. If you're going to do these, it's not often realistic you're going to get them off for a credit or a small debit, but you try to get that, obviously, as small as possible. But obviously, they liked this 17.5-point spread instead, so intriguing strikes. This one a little bit closer to the fire than some of the ones we've seen before, too, so maybe that's part of the reason why they're willing to shell out a little bit more for this one. Interesting stuff. So that's kind of the big dog today, those two. That's 100,000 contracts right there. Outside of that, a heck of a lot of nothing. 16,000 of the AUG 13 puts for number 3. 14,000 of the AUG 40s, 4Os. That's interesting for number 4. And 13,000 of the AUG 20 calls. Let's look really quickly. No, they didn't go up as a spread. I thought might be a bit of a risk reversal. What about the vertical? Yeah, no, the 20s and the 40s went up a couple hours apart as well. So not a vertical there. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, not a heck of a lot of action outside of that 1x3. But that 1x3, intriguing in its own right, listeners. Yesterday, obviously a much more action-packed day. 808,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog, 78,000 of the AUG 15 puts. So there you go. Some puts in August making it back. Obviously not enough to make it into our top 10, but I kind of expected more of that kind of paper, and hence seeing some of those in our top 10 this week, but not quite there yet. Number 2, 60,000 of the SEP 60s. That's what I was talking about out there. I think that's where some of that action and that unwinding came on our friends, the SEP 60s. Let me just pull that up really quickly, see. Yes, they were closing on that. That's kind of what I thought. All right, so number 2, 60,000 of the SEP 60s. Number 3, 60,000 as well of the DEES 45. So interesting stuff going on there. Would they be unwinding that and then rolling it to the DEES 45s? We've seen stranger things. Also, that 60s were part of that 1x3, so strange to take part of that off and roll that somewhere else. But they were opening on the DEES 45s for the exact same amount. So read into that what you will. I don't think I have it here. Oh, you know what? They did roll it from the SEP 60s to the DEES 45s. It was a spread, 60,660 times. So interesting stuff there. I guess unwinding part of that 1x3, unless that was separate paper also happened to be on the 60 strike. I mean, we've seen stranger things. Number 4, we got 59,000 of the AUG 18s, and rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 38,000 of the AUG 25s. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts on that? Rolling those SEP 60s to the DEES 45s, doing it now and doing it 60,000 times. Do you think they're unwinding part of that 1x3 and moving it to DEES, or is that just maybe some other paper they had on there on the same strike just by happenstance?
Yeah, it seems like they're rolling and repositioning their delta. That would be what I would gather from that trade.
Does have the air of that about it. Wednesday, the big dog day, 1.36 million contracts, listeners. No small part of that due to a pretty sizable trade going up here. We have, looks like the SEP 1315 put spread / roll going up 230,000 by 224,000 times. So 554,000 contracts. So far more than we've already seen trading in total today, just in this one trade out here, listeners. So that's a pretty big boy. You see one of those going up, you're going to have a pretty action-packed day as a result. Then we have behind it, number 3, we have 92,000 of the SEP 60. So there you go. Again, why we're looking a little bit lighter on that SEP 60 strike right now. Number 4, 60,000 of the DEES 45s. And then number 5, 47,000 of the October 20s. Interesting. Tuesday, exactly a million. Don't see that too often. 1.0 million exactly going up on Tuesday. The big dog on Tuesday, 92,000 of the AUG 22s, followed by 55,000 of the July 13 halves, 45,000 of the October 20s to number 3, 37,000 of the July 13 half puts to number 4, and number 5, 34,000 of the AUG 16 puts. Of course, you do see a lot of action heading into the Wednesday, usually, of expiration week, and that's kind of what we saw on Tuesday. Monday, decently active, but nothing to blow your doors off, except for maybe this. 668,000, by the way, was the total volume on Monday. 97,000 of the AUG 21s are going up on Monday, so that's nothing to sneeze at. The rest of it, not so much. 27,000 for number 2 of the July 13 half puts. Number 3, 26,000 of the July 16 puts. Number 4, 24,000 of the AUG 16 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on Monday, 22,000 of the AUG 16 puts. Mr. Meatball, we talked about some ratios and some unwinding of some upside. Anything else catching your eye, including this looks like massive put spread going up in September on Wednesday, sir?
Yeah, they're building some pretty significant bear positions in VIX, and which should not be ignored. That I think that's interesting. Those SEP 15s have massive open interest now, and the 13s as well. So, I'm keeping an eye on it.
That's obviously why, listeners, those 2 SEP put positions catapulted themselves into our top 10 this week as a result of size opening on this spread on Wednesday. So that's why they were able to outpace everything going up in August out there. So intriguing stuff. Let me just see if I can get the level. Looks like it went up for 71 cents, at least the first print. They did it in a bunch of blocks. The first 25,000 lot of that spread went up for 71 cents. So intriguing stuff. You like buying that SEP 13-15 put spread, listeners, for 71 cents? It's interesting. Let's keep on rolling here, listeners. Let's see what else is interesting. Let's go out to the land of all things inverse. And it seemed like it was about to give up some of the ghost earlier this week, and now getting the ghost right back. SVIX at about a 29.5 right now, up about 0.75 of a point out there this week. Doing decent paper so far today, about 1,500 contracts on the tape. That looks even better when you see that the ADV continues to hang out around 2,000 contracts a day. So 1,500 already so far. Nothing to sneeze at. The big dog today, about almost 300 of the AUG 29 calls. It's like paper gobbling those bad boys up. And again, those are in the money, so an interesting choice. Let's just see really quickly what they're trading. They bought 250 of them for 2.25. Okay, they're already $0.50 roughly in the money. They paid 2.25 for the AUG 29s. Interesting, maybe a little bit of a stock replacement. If so, interesting way to go about it. Not a cheap way to go about it, but intriguing stuff here nonetheless, for a contract that's not getting you a ton of delta. Interesting, but intriguing stuff. The top positions out there right now in SVIX, kind of similar to what they were last time. Obviously, we have one going the way of the dodo today. The biggest position in SVIX is going the way of the dodo today. These are the July 8 puts, 2,200 of these. Spoiler alert, those are not going to come into play today unless something catastrophic happens in the final hours of the session, followed by 2,100 of the AUG 9 puts. So again, these strikes, these funky strikes, I think it makes some sense if you can get a decent level. I'll have to go see what they got for these, but if you want to overwrite these levels, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to pick up an SVIX around that level. So not the worst way to go about it, I suppose, if you can get anything even remotely decent for these. I think we talked about some of these downside puts in the past, and we were surprised they got more than you might expect for them. So that could be one way to get an entry point here in SVIX if you're not overly enthused with loading up on the 29s right now for 2.25. 1,200 for number 3 of the SEP 35s, number 4 about 1,100 of the AUG 30 puts. Those are interesting. AUG 30 puts. Wonder what those bad boys, all of a sudden my screens are going crazy on me. AUG 30 puts, though. An intriguing choice out here, playing a little bit of the old fade, perhaps. These traded today for about $2 as well. Interesting. So 2.25 for the AUG 29s or the SEP 30 puts, or AUG 30 puts, excuse me, for about $2. Which of those would you rather have in your back pocket if you had to buy one, listeners? Intriguing. And then round out the top 5, about 1,000 of the July 28s. Mr. Meatball, what's catching your eye out there in SVIX as it continues to nip at the heels of 30? And also, fun thought question, which of those would you rather have in your back pocket? The AUG 29s for 2.25 or the AUG 30 puts for about $2? Or which would you rather have?
I would rather have the calls.
Interesting. I can see why.
Yeah.
I don't see a ton of SVIX downside in the near future, but intriguing. Anything else catching your eye in the land of SVIX, sir?
No, volume still, the option volume still hasn't completely picked up, but, there's a little bit of flow here and there. Kind of looking for the markets to tighten up. There was a little December call spread buyer, it looks like. But that's about it.
I know it's like asking for more of a product that can't deliver already, but how transformative would a weekly be in this product, right? It would it would change the game completely. And I know it's weird because they don't have the liquidity to really support it now, but I think if you added a weekly, I think we'd see a pretty sharp uptake in liquidity. What do you think, sir?
Yes, I agree with you. I think weeklies would be very, very popular.
You need to get on the horn and say, hey, what are you doing? Get us some weeklies out there. It seems almost inherent to the nature of the product to have a weekly. Dare I say it, even more appropriate than a 0-day contract in the SPX would be a weekly in SVIX. It just seems perfect. And yet, they don't have it. So you got to go monthly in SVIX. I could see why some people are kind of like, the spreads are already wide and you got to go out a whole month. Not my bag. But you get a weekly in there, you start seeing some paper flowing, things start tightening up. Bam. Bob's your uncle, SVIX. A tradable product for more of you out there, which is the goal at the end of the day. Speaking of tradable products, or perhaps the opposite of that, we've got UVIX continuing to just circle the drain. I don't know what they're doing with this thing. 385, listeners, when we kicked off the show, down another 1/4 point. 4,500 contracts on the tape. The ADV a little bit shy of 8,000 now, 7,800. Moving in the wrong direction again. I wonder why. Down 500 contracts. Your things broke the 4 handle. Of course, options volume is going down. So yeah, the use case for this product, the design, the thought behind it, I don't know. Interesting times out there. Still roughly 4x ADV of UVIX versus SVIX, so more people flock into UVIX. I get it, it's the levered product. But I think we might see some change on that if we did add I hate to keep beating this drum, but if we did add a weekly to SVIX, the things we might see out there. Alas, not seeing a ton of interesting stuff in UVIX, the top position out there, the July 4 halves, 3,000 of those are going the way of the dodo today. If you bought those, a sad trombone for you listeners, if you overrode them, I should say. If you overrode them, hopefully you got a decent amount of premium for you because it looks like they're working out for you. Number 2, we have the DS5s, 2,000 of those, followed by 2,000 of the DS7s. So it looks like we have a DS vertical, the 5-7 vertical. Doesn't seem like that one's going to work out, but hey, you got some time there. So funkier things have happened. Mr. Meatball, I hate to even ask at this point because it's just such a nonsense product, but anything catching your eye in the land of UVIX, sir?
No, they need a reverse split.
Have you heard any rumors
Plain
on
and
that?
simple.
Have you heard any rumors on that front? Because I have not, sir.
I have not.
So what are they doing? Are they just trying to let this product go the way of the dodo? Are they just done with it? Have they already washed their hands of it, sir?
I hope not. It's got some potential if they reverse split it. I mean, the options. There's some trading in the options. There definitely would be if it's reverse split, and there's some decent volume, believe it or not. It's doing about 7.5 million shares a day. I don't know why you wouldn't reverse split it. That's not bad.
Yeah, I don't. Sometimes I just shake my head at these products and what they're doing behind the scenes for them. UVXY showing that if you do reverse split it, can get some action again. 16 3/4. So it was looking a little bit frothier early in the week, kind of keeping pace, and now giving a lot of that up now as the week is coming to a close. Down about 3/4 of a point. 16 3/4 right now. So again, not getting all the erosion you may have wanted in the mothership VIX, but in some of the ancillary products, they are starting to give up the ghost towards the end of the week here. About 60,000 contracts on the tape. That's not nothing, especially when you consider that the ADV is only 65,000. It's plummeted another 25,000 in the wrong direction. So I think today is going to start maybe turning that around a little bit. Again, we don't see a lot of the downside happening. People get less enamored with UVXY now that we're starting to see some of that kick in. We're starting to see some paper as a result. Let's look very quickly what's going up out there today. It's the July 17 puts have gone up about 6,000 times. Makes sense. So it's about 1/4 of a point in the money right now, followed by the about 4,200 of the July 17 calls. So again, that's the at the money strikes. Makes some sense. Those would be flying fast and furious right now. The big dog position out there in UVXY, 28,000 of the SEP 8s. Again, we talked about this before. The 8 strike calls and puts, whatever it might be, across all these products seems to have some fascination for some people out there. They love the 8 strike. 28,000 of the SEP 8s. Let's just look really quickly, listeners, if I can get it up in time. Here we go. Let's look really quickly and see when those bad boys were opened. The SEP 8 calls, they opened them on June 23rd, so not that long ago, listeners. That's a weird one because I'm not showing the volume, but it shows the OI gapped up 28,000. Something's weird on my data today. It shows only on that day. It showed 69 traded, but the OI changed by 28,800. So something funky there. It looks like the prices were around 7 or 8 cents that day. So if that's the case, they loaded up on a bunch of these for around anywhere between a nickel to 8 cents. So not the most expensive of swings at the bat, but that's right. These are pre-split adjusted. That would explain it because that was right around the day of the reverse split too. So that would make some sense why we saw some funky paper going up out there, followed by 27,000 for number 2 of, again, pre-split adjusted Jan doubles, Jan 55. So interesting stuff. Mr. Meatball, you been up to anything interesting, up to any no good out there in UVXY of late?
Yeah, I've been riding puts, and it's been pretty nice. I think next week for UVXY is going to be a fun one. The thing is decaying like you wouldn't believe right now. The daily roll is about 1.5% right now in UVXY. So this thing could just go to this thing will be 10 before you know it.
Hence our discussion not that long ago about why they did such an anemic reverse split, because they're going to have to do it again. I guess they really like that process. They enjoy it because they want to keep diving into it. Either way, UVXY giving up the ghost. VXX giving up a little bit of the ghost after, again, remaining firm for most of the early part of the week here. 23.40 right now, down about 0.6 of a point. Decent volume on the tape today, 61,000. That's looked pretty decent because the ADV is about 70,000 right now. That's ticked up about 2,000. So VXX volume-wise, starting to move in the right direction. Again, a pale shadow of what it used to be, 400+ thousand ADV. Those days probably gone forever, but intriguing stuff nonetheless. In terms of action, let's see what is the big dog out there in VXX today, listeners. We have about 4,300 of the July 30s going up. That's interesting. By 4,000 of the July 23 halves. I have to assume, it looks like they bought those July 30s. So Interesting, given the fact that we're at about a 2340 right now. The 30s that's next week. Those are next week. Okay, there we go. That would make a little more sense. I thought that was our end of day today. They got a week to go. 30 still maybe a bit of a bridge too far, but you got a week at least for it to happen, followed by 4,000 today of the 23 halves. Also going up, also opening today. So interesting stuff here. In terms of positions out there, the big dog, about 28,000 of the AUG 22 puts. Those are looking pretty good, followed by 22,000 of the SEP 20 puts. In fact, if you scan the entire top 10 in VXX right now, listeners, there is one call to be found. 21,000 of the July 40s. Interesting. Don't think those are going to pay off, but hey, crazier things have happened. Maybe not crazier than hitting the 40 strike in VXX before the end of the day today, but we have seen some weird stuff happen out there. Mr. Meatball, I know you've been slinging a lot of downside in VXX. What do you have up your sleeve for us this week?
Oh, I'm actually out of everything right now. I'm going to have to put something new on. Took a lot of money on my last set. What I will tell you is that looking at the premiums here, I don't think the 23 puts in August for $1.30 seem that far out of whack. They look a little inexpensive to me.
Yeah, they're only a few cents out of the money right now. So yeah. Interesting stuff out there. Listeners, you liking yourself a little bit of downside? Maybe that might be a good question of the week as well. Are you finally back in on VXX, or did you wash your hands of it last year? We still have some guests coming on who haven't been on the show in a while, and they're, it's VXX is back. It's kind of fun for them to talk about it again. So some people are still reawakening to this product after washing their hands of it. I fall kind of in that category as well. I very publicly washed my hands of VXX last year, and they're doing their darndest to try to lure me back to the dark side. In terms of the dark side, we are back in it, listeners, in single-name vol territory. A lot of earnings popping off this week. We had Bank of America, Chucky Schwab, Morgan Stanley, and IB on Tuesday. Interesting, they were doing our pro Q&A while the earnings was going on, so that's why they were a little circumspect on some of the questions. Wednesday, we had Tesla, Netflix, and United Airlines. Thursday, we had American, J&J, Nokia, Abbott, and Capital One. Today, we have Amex going off as well. In terms of earnings move results, we had J&J. They were pricing in 2.2%. They delivered 4.3%. Again, this is immediately after the announcement. We're not tracking it throughout the entire day. That's up to you. We're talking about how much they priced in versus kind of the initial earnings move you get as a result. So J&J, one of our bigger outperformers, pretty much doubling their straddle. Again, it's a pretty anemic straddle, so bear that in mind. But interesting stuff. Netflix actually underperformed a little bit. If you waited throughout the rest of the day, they kind of outperformed, but they had priced in nearly 9%, and as of the early blush of this report, they had only delivered about 8%, so they still underperformed. As the day went on, they moved more, and they kind of ended up outpacing that straddle, but in the early blush, not so much. IBM, same deal. They had priced in 3.7%. They delivered 3.2%, so underperformance there. American Airlines, 4.7% they were pricing in. They delivered 4.3%. And then Tesla, even with that big move, still underperforming. They were pricing in 7.4%. They delivered 5.4%. Again, that's another one I think if you waited a bit during the day, you ended up matching or even exceeding that straddle. So again, it is very much a frame of reference conversation at the end of the day, but we can't keep these reports open forever. We have to run them so that we could talk about them on the show. So in the initial finite evaluation period, they had underperformed. Same deal for United Airlines. They had priced in nearly 6%. They delivered 2.6%. And they popped off the night before. So far at least, we're getting a fair amount of earnings underperformance. Of course, if you add up all the names we've seen so far on the season, a little bit of a different story. The big names are kind of getting all the headlines. If you add up the whopping 35 that we'd had reported so far as of the time of this report, we were at 160%. So a little bit of outperformance in aggregate there. That's obviously going to fall off, listeners. Our longer-term average right now, there we go. It's back up to 98%. There was a weird blip there for a while. It was showing 86. I'm not sure what happened, but it's back up to 90. That makes more sense now. So our long-term average now, 98%. If you want more detail on all those earnings, vol numbers, earnings straddles, all that fun. Matt, the keeper of all that data, will be joining us on the advisor's option next week, so we'll get into all that fun and a little bit more. Speaking of fun, we got some fun from the listeners. Let's get into it right now. A little bit of the old volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody, let's get down and dirty with some of your questions and comments. Also, your feedback on our question of the week. This week, we're asking you, we've seen a lot of quote-unquote interesting options paper lately. We can't decide which ones we like the most or really least. So we'll let you decide. Gun to your head, which of these would you rather buy? Gave you 3 examples, all of which we talked about on Options Oddities last week. So if you want to check out that show and a whole bunch of others we talk about there every week, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go to get all that fun. The Nikola AUG 5s. These were interesting. Someone paid 37 cents for a bunch of them. The stock was, I think, a little bit shy at $2.50 when they went up. So stock needs to pretty much double by August expiration. Or we have the Rivian August 40 calls. The stock was somewhere below $25 when these went up for 40 cents. Or the Keurig Dr. Pepper October 33s for 55 cents. And you know what? I almost didn't post these because it seemed like kind of a no-brainer. I liked these. I wanted to trade these. And of course, we got into it on our Options Oddities show. And by the time the show is done, the markets are closed. And so, of course, the weekend happens. I ended up missing the boat on these bad boys. But they did work out pretty well. Keurig right now, KDP 32.5. It was somewhere around 31 and change when we first profiled these. So these were looking pretty good. Just net premium versus the amount of time and the required movement, these seem like a no-brainer to me. But Mr. Meatball, I know you were a fan of these because you traded something similar this week. I know which one you're voting for, but which way do you think our audience is going for? The Keurig calls, the Rivian calls, or the Nikola calls?
Probably Rivian, but I went for KDP.
Yeah, KDP. That one was a no-brainer. Who knew how much upside lurked in the lands of beverages, Mr. Meatball, huh? There's a lot of juice out there to be found in the land of Keurig Dr. Pepper. Well, right now, our audience, and in the early blush, you folks were all about the Rivian. I think you were just caught up in that Rivian euphoria. It was over 70%. It was closing in on 3/4 of you were loving up those Rivian AUG 40s for 40 cents. You need a hell of a move. Rivian right now, $25.50, listeners. So I don't think you're getting it today, unfortunately. But still, over half of you, 54.3%, still choosing the AUG 40s. So you're still in meme stock mode. You're swinging for the fences on these bad boys. Followed by 28.3%. So I'm glad to see some saner heads are prevailing. The Keurig Dr. Pepper doubles now moving into the number 2 spot with 28.3%. Bringing up the rear, the Nikola AUG 5s for 37 cents, only 15.2% like those. So no love for Nikola out there. And then 2.2% saying other. Again, if you're going to write the others, tell us what your other is. You just choose other. And don't write in. The whole point of that is write in what your other is. We want to hear what it is. Last week, we asked you folks, very relevant to this show, the last time, well, not the last time, but one of the times VIX hit 12 was in 2017, and it kicked off a dark period for the options market. The last time was actually January of 2020. We don't need to go into what happened after that. Will we see a repeat this year with lower volatility leading to lower volume in the second half of 2023? 2 choices, yes, low VIX kills volume, or no, 0 day will save us all. And the dark side coming out of you in that one. Nearly 70% of you choosing yes, we will see less volume because low VIX kills volume. Only about 30% of you choosing no, and that 0 day will come to the rescue. Let's keep rolling out here. We touched on this really quickly, I think, on Options Bootcamp, but he actually sent it in to this show originally. So I like to make sure everyone gets their questions answered on their preferred show. He says, I love all the shows. This is the Islander boy, by the way. I love all the shows, particularly Option Block, Vol Views, Crypto, and Option Bootcamp. I know volatility is down in equities, but would you say it's down pretty much across all asset classes? And the answer to that is mostly yes, but with a caveat. If you listen to yesterday's TWIFO, you know that this saber rattling out in Ukraine has really jacked the vol again in ag. So that vol starting to come back to life. It was pretty anemic. But outside of those and some weird other pockets, I mean, it used to be even nat gas. Nat gas is still around a 50-odd, 55, 60. But if you know anything about nat gas, That's pretty low. Nat gas was at triple digits not too long ago. Even crypto vols, Bitcoin and ETH, those have been well north of triple digits as well. They're both in the low 40s or high 30s. So vol coming off. You don't need me to tell you where VIX is. That's what the whole show's about that. So in the low teens. Gold vol is at like a 10. So yeah, right now you're kind of hard pressed to find pockets of explosive vol outside of what's going on in the ags maybe right now. Mr. Rocklob, excuse me, I apologize. Mr. Meatball, what would you have to say here for the Islander boy? He wants to know, do you think, and he knows vol is down in the equities, but would you say it's down pretty much across all asset classes?
I think wheat blew up this week. And at any given time, you're going to have different commodities do not correlate the same way equities correlate. So you're going to have wheat, which is blowing up because of Ukraine. But on the other hand, you got something like oil vol that is not going anywhere. So it's really a case-by-case basis with these. You look at something like the OVX, and it's, down at 29, relatively low. But, some of the grain ETFs and grain futures options are not seeing lower vol because of what's happening in Ukraine. Wheat vol is up into the 40s, normally hangs out in the low 30s. You look at soybean. Soybean vol pretty good, pretty normal. Corn vol is 1 second. Corn vol pretty normal, but so it's just that's the whole point, right? You've got wheat blowing up, but corn and soy aren't doing anything. So you got to kind of look at commodities as their own individual kind of spaces. Sometimes they'll all move together, but not in the same way equities tend to.
No, corn put up some numbers this week, though, in terms of volume, closing in on the E-mini, like 1.5 million contracts going up in corn on CME as of yesterday.
Oh,
so that's a hell of a lot of paper for corn. So corn is doing some action out there. But you're right. The ags are kind of the lone pocket of vol right now, and that's probably a bit of an aberration. Hopefully, once this saber rattling settles down over there, if it does, we'll see some of this vol come in. But yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, if you're looking and the other traditional bastions, nat gas, even crypto, not looking that juicy right now. Ryan Stein has a question: what is the reasoning behind NASDAQ choosing to focus solely on at-the-money volatility for the VOLQ product as opposed to the skew approach taken by VIX? Well, I can answer that for you, but I do believe we are going to be joined next week in the hot seat by Mr. Scott Nations, the creator of VOLQ. So I'll let him answer that himself. But having talked to him many times on this show and others, I could say pretty much he's a fan more of that old school market making approach. You do a straddle run that would give you the vols for all the different products, and that was pretty much just a straight at the money straddle across all the different term structure of the product you were looking at, and they didn't add any skew or anything like that. He finds that to be a little bit, shall we say, opaque. And look at the issues SIBO has had with that as a result. He thinks that kind of gums up the work, so he wants to keep it straight, just the facts, ma'am, hence just at the money volatility. But you know what? I'll let him answer you in his own words on the show next week, because now it's time for us to keep on rolling. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crystal ball. And it's kind of emblematic of where VIX is these days. It is almost literally unched from the start of the show, still hanging out at about a 13.5. So I was the closest, but that does not mean I was close. I was at a 14 double, so I'm 1.05 away, so not within our margin of victory. We also were joined by Joe Teague from Equity Armor last week. He was at a 15.05. No love for him. Mr. Meatball, 16.61. I think the short answer is that we were all expecting a little bit more juice heading into this big rebalance and what we're actually seeing out there. So far, that not playing out. But again, the session is young. Anything could happen in the latter half. But right now, not the case. Looking at some of our listeners out there, Frank was at a little over 14. Options Queen. Choose where I was. You were carping me, Options Queen. 14.5. What are you doing? Z231 1380. He might be one of our closest ones. I'll have our producer go through. That's the only 13 handle I even see. So we'll see. Everyone else was 14 handle and above. But again, I don't see all of them here. So our producers will go through and let everyone know if you're within our 10th of a point margin of victory, which I was last week. That was fun. Nice little bullseye for me. No joy this week. So Mr. Meatball, I'll tell you what, I'll be charitable. I'll let you choose what you want to do. You want to go first or last?
I can go first.
All right, go for it, sir.
1221.
You've been hanging out on that one for a while out there. 1221 for the Meatball and his palindromic nonsense. Again, we're at a 13.5 right now. I think it's kind of hard to argue post rebound. I'm not even going to look at the chat. I don't want to get any ideas in my head from what you people are up to. I'm going to say for me next week, I think a little bit less vol is the order of the day as well. I don't know if I'm going to go as full palindromic. Tell you what, I'll clip mine 2 points. I'll go for a 12 double. All right, listeners, that music means that we are done here for the week, at least for all you on-demand folks, all you pro folks hang out. I'll be back in a little bit for Options Oddities. See what weirdness we have in store for us this week, what profitable upside call trades await us. A lot of them lurking out there these days. But before we go, Mr. Meatball, if folks want to reach out to you to discuss VIX downside or maybe some of these inverse vol products or maybe just some Keurig Dr. Pepper calls, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, go to optionpit.com. You can read about what I'm writing every day. We're rebranding the VIX Edge to be called the Trader's Edge. So that's exciting. Come and check it out.
All right, now I'm looking at our live chat. Didn't want to get colored out there. I'm seeing 13 halves again. So keeping things kind of unched. 13 quarters. 1375 is a little bit more vol. Okay. I see what you're putting down there. Get those guesses in now if you're listening live. If you're listening after the fact, you can play too. Just send them in via social media or questions at theoptioninsider.com. Try to get them in the day the show goes live, so it's fairer that way. Otherwise, if you wait till next Thursday, obviously that's cheating. So we don't allow those. Pretty much one day only out there. And you too can be entered to win fabulous prizes. That is going to do it for us on the on-demand side. Today, I want to thank you all for joining us out there. Remember, have a safe, fun weekend. And then, of course, kick off on Monday with the option block all the way through to next Friday, where we'll be joined by Mr. Scott Nations for another Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.